So we're going to talk a little bit about the High Priestess card, the second Major Arcana card of the Tarot. The High Priestess, if you're looking at the trajectory of the Major Arcana and using the metaphor of a human being coming into and their first experiences on Earth and kind of the journey of the hero through a human, then, if the Fool represents deciding to come to Earth in the first place and the Magician represents DNA, the High Priestess then begins to represent sort of the womb time of that child, the time before they're even born. And in that sense, the High Priestess comes to represent sort of a heavenly mother. And it also represents this idea of inner voice, which is really nicely encapsulated in the Osho Zen version of the High Priestess deck. So inner voice, meaning, there is knowledge and wisdom, in this card that is represented through the High Priestess archetype. It's not anything that is written and we've had to learn. It's stuff that we already know coming into our world. We already know this. It's sort of our intuitive inner voice rather than an outer learning. Inner learning is what the High Priestess really encapsulates. In a more traditional tarot deck, here's the Rider, again, the universal Rider-Waite. We see this, really in symbolism a lot more. So along with the idea of inner voice, there's usually a theme of blue. She's usually wearing blue, which is sort of this color of the heavens, right? This heavenly, inner color. And blue is also the color of, the Virgin Mary. If you look at sort of iconography from around the world, the Virgin Mary is often portrayed as wearing blue. So the same idea here. And she very often has this moon crown. Here you see the crown of the three phases, or, the phases of the moon, or the triple goddess symbol. So, she looks more like a lunar deity than a solar deity. And you have all of the association with the lunar deity represented here. Behind her, we often see a screen of pomegranates, or there's a veil of some sort. Pomegranates, of course, represent wisdom. And behind the screen, we can often get glimpses of this other scene that we cannot see because the veil is there. So there's this idea of veiled wisdom, or the unconscious mind, that sometimes we just can't tap into as readily as the conscious mind. And then we've got these light and dark columns on either side of her. And in the light and dark columns, we start seeing the idea that, where we had one in the Magician card, now we have two. We have the idea of duality, of light and dark, right? And in the Inner Voice card, we see this, 1-2 with the moon over the head as well. So we'll see these columns in a lot of different cards. I'll show you a few of them. Here in the Universal Worth Tarot, we have a red and a blue column. And that can be, sort of carnal or sensual knowledge versus more of a heavenly knowledge, sort of these two aspects of the human being. And we see a yin-yang on the book on her lap. So there's all these ideas of duality and light and dark forces represented in this card. The Priestess, of course, sitting in the middle of the two. She honors both, she respects both, and she brings them into union. So other cards with veils and columns. Here's a card from a pretty new deck called the Rumi Tarot by Nigel Jackson. And here we see again two columns. There isn't a veil behind her, but of course this very Persian-looking priestess has the veil on her. So we see the same thing. Underneath it has this really neat quote, "Mysteries are not communicable save to those who know." And that's obviously Rumi, coming from the Rumi Tarot. So the same idea embedded again. Here in the mother piece, we see the two columns on either side of her. She is wearing this crown that kind of resembles, crescent moons, very African-looking priestess. And here we also see on the columns this idea of female and male, one of the two opposing, forces in the world. We can choose to come into the world, but at the end of the day, we also then are going to be either one or the other, male or female. And if we're thinking about this card as representing womb time in a certain sense, well, yeah, you become either male or female in the womb, right? So that's really our first encounter with duality. In the Daughters of the Moon Tarot, another beautiful round deck, we see, the priestess has her eyes closed. She's gazing at this orb, and there's this pyramid shape at the bottom there, the moon on her crown again. And she's got wings. Instead of pillars, there are wings, and they are calling their priestess Isis, who of course is a moon goddess. And then, so all of these ideas are basically coming back to the same idea of inner knowing, inner knowledge. And that's really, if you wanted a divinatory meaning in a nutshell for the High Priestess card, I would always come back to something like inner knowing, inner knowledge, inner wisdom, quiet inner time, where you tap into this unconscious part of yourself, or your intuition, right, your gut feeling. So some more, this is a priestess card from the Mythic Fairy Tarot, fairy spelled Faerie, the Mythic Fairy Tarot. And again, she's gazing down a lot like Isis, and she's looking at an orb. We don't see any pillars behind her, but we do see the crown resembling the other crowns we've seen. But of course, you know that card 2, the High Priestess, represents intuition and inner knowing. If you pick up any tarot deck, then you can read it that way. Absolutely. There is a really neat little blurb about her in the book that comes with this deck, but that's really all you need to know to read with the cards. One more just little card that's a little different. So here's the Inner Child cards, the Fairy Tale Tarot representation of the High Priestess. They have renamed her the Fairy Godmother. And they're thinking of the Fairy Godmother as an archetype or a metaphor that we have in our Western fairy tales. And she's got the moons on her cloak, but she's very much representative of this idea of sort of, this dream, this idea that these princesses, and we kind of see this idea from Cinderella underneath in this particular card, the princess wishing for something, and the fairy godmother holding kind of a key to the kingdom in a way as she grants wishes. So that's just a very different interpretation of the High Priestess card, but I just really liked this one and wanted to show it to you also. So that's it. In a nutshell, that is the High Priestess card. Inner wisdom, intuition, inner knowledge, duality, opposing forces brought together. And that's kind of what she represents. I hope you've gotten a lot of useful information out of this mini training. Thank you so much for joining me. So I hope you enjoyed my mini training on the Major Arcana card, and you can go to my website www.virtualtarotschool.com to receive 21 other trainings just like this one. All you have to do is visit the website and it'll show you how to do that from there. I hope to see you on virtualtarotschool.com.